The lock hadn't moved in 7 days. 7 long days, and she had the nerve to smile at me like I was imagining things. That tiny silver latch on the basement door sat in the exact same position I left it. Untouched, unmoved, almost mocking me in the weak morning light. And when she brushed past me carrying her mug of coffee, she only glanced at it and said, "Oh, that? You worry too much," as if I hadn't been standing there for a full minute staring at it, feeling something cold unfurl in my chest. If you've ever felt dismissed, ignored, or made to doubt your own instincts, this story will stay with you. Let me take you through the 7 days that changed everything. I didn't say a word at first. I just watched her walk across the hallway, the steam from her cup drifting behind her like nothing was out of place. But inside, my thoughts shifted. Slow, steady, deliberate. At my age, people assume you react emotionally before thinking. I've learned to let them assume whatever they need to. It makes it easier to see what they don't want you to notice. Her shoes squeaked slightly each time she stepped, a wet sound that didn't belong in a house that hadn't seen rain in a week. I filed that away quietly, the way I've filed away dozens of little things over the past months. Women my age learn to observe. Mostly because people stop expecting us to. "It's only 8:30, she said casually, glancing at the kitchen clock as she passed. "You're up early today." "I couldn't sleep," I replied, keeping my voice calm. She didn't need to know that I'd been awake since 4, watching the hallway, waiting for her to do something, anything, that would contradict the story she'd been feeding me. When she reached the kitchen, she opened the window as if she were trying to let in fresh air, but instead a wave of sharp, chemical smell pushed outward. It hit me like a slap. It was faint but unmistakable, bleach mixed with something harsher, something almost metallic. She caught my reaction and forced a laugh. "You know how I get about cleaning," she said lightly. "I probably overdid it." "Overdid it?" The living room smelled like a janitor's closet. Even from where I stood, the scent pulled at my memory. Too much scrubbing, too much wiping, too much covering up. I had raised 2 children, cleaned houses, tended to spills and stains, and patched up more messes in a lifetime than she could imagine. Wait, I knew. This smell was layered, deliberate. I walked slowly toward the living room, dragging my fingers along the wall to steady myself, though part of me didn't need the support at all. I only needed her to think I did. The sunlight from the window hit the floor in a clean rectangle, but something in that brightness made the uneven streaks more visible. They weren't scratches. They weren't shadows. They were wipe marks, long, rushed, inconsistent. She followed behind me too quickly. "I have a meeting at 10, she said, watching my eyes, not the room. "So if you need anything." I cut her off by bending down. A grocery bag I'd dropped earlier still lay half open near the cabinet. I reached for it, but my hand brushed something cold beneath the wood. Something small. Something metal. My heart didn't race, not the way she expected it to. Instead, it steadied the way it does before saying something you've waited years to say. I slid the object into my palm without letting her see. A ring. His ring. It was unmistakable. The one he wore every day, the one he twisted when he was thinking, the one that never left his finger in 40 years of marriage. It rested in my palm like a stone from a riverbed, cold, dull, carrying a weight no one else could feel. I slipped it into my pocket before she leaned in. "What are you looking for?" she asked, her voice too light, too rehearsed. "Just picking up the bag," I answered, lifting it with both hands so she couldn't see my fingers closing around the fabric to hide the slight trembling. She forced another smile, wider this time, showing a little too much gum. "You dropped it earlier. I was going to get it for you." "You didn't," I said softly. The sentence wasn't an accusation yet, but it hung in the air like one. Her eyes flickered. Just for a moment. A tiny flickering crack in her mask. But I saw it. Women who've lived as long as I have become experts at catching micro-expressions. The lies people tell with their eyes when their mouths haven't caught up. I walked deeper into the living room, making a slow circle. The cushions on the sofa looked too neatly placed. The blanket was folded sharp, crisp like a hotel bed. She had cleaned, yes, but not the way someone tidies for guests. This was covering. Concealing. Resetting. My throat tightened, but I refused to let emotion show. She believed I was fragile, she would slip up. So I played the role she assigned me. Slow-moving, soft-spoken, grieving, confused. Let her underestimate me. It was the only advantage I had, and it was already proving more powerful than I expected. "Why did you scrub the walls?" I asked suddenly, my tone even. Her head jerked just an inch. What? The walls, I repeated calmly. The streaks are fresh. They weren't here yesterday. She swallowed hard. I told you I was cleaning. Spring cleaning. It's January, I said. Her face stiffened before she looked away. Oh. I started early. I let the silence stretch. It was astonishing how silence burrowed into guilty people. She kept wringing her hands, rubbing her fingers over her palm like she was trying to wash something off. I moved toward the hallway, pretending I needed to lean on the wall. The floor felt uneven under my slippers. Not dramatically so, just slightly raised in one narrow strip running from the entry toward the back. A rug had been moved. Shifted. I looked up and saw that a photo frame hung crooked, just barely, as if bumped by someone passing by in haste. Small things. Little things. But little things build stories. I thought you said the plumber came yesterday, I murmured, crouching a bit. She froze. Yes. He did. Then why would he track mud only in this area? I slid my finger along the faint dark smudge that ran near the baseboard. Plumbers usually move around the whole house. Her throat bobbed. He was only here a few minutes. I stood slowly, watching her shoulders tense as I did. What was his name? She blinked. What? You must remember his name. You hired him. She didn't answer right away. She looked at her phone instead, as if checking for something, someone, an excuse that hadn't arrived yet. I don't recall at the moment. Convenient, I said. Her eyes snapped toward mine. And for the first time I saw something raw flash through her expression. Not irritation, not impatience, but fear. Quick and shallow, like a ripple on water. I didn't push further. Not yet. Fear had to simmer before it boiled. I walked toward the hallway closet and gently tugged on the door. She rushed forward immediately. You don't need anything from there, she said hastily. I reorganized it. It's a mess. A too fast answer. A too tight tone. Is that so? I said, not opening it. She nodded quickly, stepping between me and the closet. She wasn't usually protective of anything in this house. That alone told me more than any words she could utter. I stepped back, pretending to accept her explanation. My heart was steady, but my skin tingled with the electric awareness that something was very wrong, and she knew it too. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. 8:42 a.m. A chilly draft crept beneath the living room window, moving the curtains just enough to show the edge of the backyard. Quiet, still, too still. She must have sensed where my eyes had gone because she immediately said, "It's cold today. Don't open the window." I hadn't touched it. She was revealing more than she realized. People always reveal the thing they fear someone discovering. I took a breath, slow and measured. Where were you last night? She didn't miss a beat. Here. Sleeping. You didn't come out of your room at all? No. But I had heard footsteps. Soft ones. Around 2 in the morning. The creaking floor near the pantry. The faint rustle of something being dragged. Of course she didn't know I'd been awake. She rarely considered what I might know. She exhaled sharply. Why all the questions? I smiled softly. Why all the answers? Her jaw tightened. I walked back toward the basement door, brushing my fingers along the wall. I stopped in front of the lock again. The same position. The same orientation. The same untouched dust on the edge. Not a single shift in the latch. You told me you checked this yesterday, I said quietly. Her lips parted. Just slightly. Enough. The silence between us tightened like a string being pulled too hard. Did I? She said weakly. Yes. You did. Her breath stuttered. Maybe I forgot. I turned to face her fully. I didn't. She stared at me, really stared, probably for the first time in months. And I saw the moment it hit her that I wasn't asking out of confusion or worry. I was asking because I already knew something she didn't realize I'd discovered. My hand rested on the lock. Her eyes followed my fingers. Her breath caught. And I stepped toward her, lowering my voice to a steady, grounded whisper meant only for her. What's behind this door that you don't want me to see? Her face drained of color. And that was where I stopped. Right there. Because the truth was coming. And she knew it. Yet she still tried to steady herself, leaning one hand on the wall as if the house suddenly tilted under her feet. For a moment neither of us spoke. She just stared at me, waiting for me to back down, to look unsure, to question my own words. But I didn't move. I didn't blink. And she finally broke eye contact first, turning away too quickly. That's when it settled in. She was more afraid of what I might find than what the police already suspected. She walked toward the kitchen, grabbing her mug with both hands as if needing something warm to hold on to. "The officers will be back later today," she said, her voice thin but forced into steadiness. They said they might need more information from us." "Good," I replied, keeping my tone easy. "I have some things to show them." Her shoulders tensed. Not visibly, not for anyone else. But at my age you learn to recognize the smallest signs. The twitch at the side of her throat. The way her breath caught fractionally before she hit it with a sip of coffee. She was unraveling thread by thread. I moved toward the hallway closet she'd blocked earlier, not opening it now, just pausing near it. I heard her footsteps immediately, stopping behind me. She was watching every move I made. "You should sit down," she said, her voice suddenly gentle, like she was speaking to a child. "You seem tired." "I'm fine," I replied. "I remember more when I'm standing." Another tiny flicker in her eyes. She didn't want me remembering anything. The doorbell rang, not loud but sharp enough to cut through the tension. She stiffened again, and for a second she didn't move. Then she hurried past me, smoothing her hair as she walked to the door. Her hand trembled when she reached for the knob. 2 officers stood outside. Same uniforms as yesterday, same clipped professionalism, but today their expressions were different. More alert, more deliberate. "Good morning," the taller one said. "We're here for a follow-up." She forced a smile, one that strained the edges of her mouth. Of course. Come in." I stepped back as they entered, watching her carefully. Eyes darting. Hands fidgeting. Breathing too fast for someone who claimed she had nothing to worry about. "Ma'am," the female officer greeted me gently. "We'd like to ask you a few more questions today." "I'm ready," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I'd like to show you something first." The younger woman's expression shifted with interest. "Go ahead." Before I directed them anywhere, though, I needed to see how she reacted. So I walked slowly toward the kitchen, not toward the basement door or the closet, but toward the table where she had been sitting earlier. The table where she had left a faint, circular stain. A mug ring. But not from the mug she was holding now. That one was clean on the bottom. A small detail, but every inconsistency mattered. I pointed at the mark. "Did you have someone here this morning?" Her body went rigid. "What? Oh, that's from yesterday." That was a lie. Coffee stains don't stay that wet overnight. One of the officers made a note. She noticed and immediately snapped. "What are you writing?" I said it's from yesterday. The officer didn't respond. I let the silence stretch before speaking again. If no one was here, then why were there 2 mugs out? "There weren't," she insisted. The officer opened the dishwasher. 2 mugs sat inside, one still dripping. My stomach tightened. She had washed it recently. Very recently. Too recently. The taller officer asked, "Who used this?" She stammered. I don't know. Maybe I forgot I used it earlier. I've been overwhelmed." A weak excuse, but I didn't challenge it aloud. Not yet. Let the officers handle their part. I had my own part to play. I turned and walked down the hallway. The officers followed. She followed them, hovering too close as though proximity could control the outcome. I walked to the front door, not to leave but to step outside for a moment. The cold morning air cut clean across my face. The neighbor's yard was quiet. His trash bin was at the edge of his driveway, lid slightly open. Something nudged at my memory. Something he'd said offhand a few days earlier. "I saw her dragging something heavy," he had whispered. "Didn't want to get involved." At the time I'd dismissed it, too overwhelmed to process it. But now it rang louder than ever. I crossed the lawn, ignoring her voice behind me calling, "Where are you going?" I walked straight to the neighbor's porch and knocked. The officers were only a few steps behind when he opened the door. He looked surprised but not unwilling to speak. "Oh, hello. Everything okay? May I ask you something?" I said gently. He nodded slowly. "Sure. Could you tell them what you told me earlier? About what you saw at night?" He hesitated, shifting his weight. His eyes flicked past me toward her, and I watched her straighten, arms folded tight, jaw set. I don't want trouble," he murmured. I stepped closer. "You won't have trouble. But I need to know. We need to know. The female officer spoke softly. Sir, anything you witnessed could help clarify the situation. He swallowed, glancing at her again. Then he sighed, rubbing his neck. I saw her dragging a heavy suitcase across the yard around midnight a few nights ago. But she kept glancing over her shoulder. A shiver raced down my spine. Not fear. Confirmation. The officers exchanged a brief, serious look. She exploded. That's not true. He's lying, he doesn't even know what he saw. The neighbor stepped back, startled. Ma'am, I'm just telling them. Why would I be dragging anything at midnight? She snapped. I lifted my chin slightly. That's what we're trying to understand. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. She looked trapped, cornered, and I could almost see her mind scrambling for a believable answer. But I wasn't done. I walked back toward our yard. I'd like to show you another thing, I told the officers. As I moved, her footsteps rushed behind me. You don't have to show them anything, she said urgently. There's nothing that matters out here. There's plenty that matters, I answered quietly. I walked to the side of the house. The ground here was softer, the soil recently disturbed. I knelt slowly, running my fingers along the uneven patch where the grass didn't match the rest. What happened here? I asked her without turning around. I worked on the garden, she blurted. Just a little. I planted some bulbs. Bulbs, I repeated softly, tracing the soil. In January. She flinched. The officers leaned in. The female one examined the ground more closely. This looks freshly turned. It's a garden, she snapped defensively. The male officer asked, What did you plant? He stared at him, mouth tight. Flowers. What kind? She blinked rapidly. The yellow ones. What are they called? He pressed. Her lips trembled. I said the yellow ones. Not a gardener in America calls flowers like that. I straightened up, my joints aching slightly from kneeling but my resolve steady. I brushed the dirt off my palms and looked directly at her. This isn't gardening, I said quietly. She looked like she might faint. You're misunderstanding. No, I whispered. You're underestimating. The officers didn't speak but their attention sharpened. They were seeing the pattern now, the inconsistencies, the panic, the rushed explanations. But while they analyzed and investigated, I kept doing what I had learned to do best. I observed. Inside, I led them to the hallway. I opened the one door she had prevented me from touching earlier, the hallway closet. The moment it swung open, she gasped. Not loudly, but with enough shock to betray everything. The closet was wrong. Too empty. Too clean. As though everything had been taken out recently, quickly. The faint smell of ammonia lingered. I stepped inside and noticed a small smear on the edge of the shelf. Faint, brownish, wiped but not fully gone. She saw me looking and stuttered. That's from old boxes. They left stains. Old boxes don't smell like this, I said gently. One of the officers leaned closer, stepping inside to examine it. She hovered at the doorway, trembling, clasping her hands so tightly her knuckles turned white. I didn't say anything else for a long moment. Then I looked up at her, meeting her eyes, not with anger, not with accusation, with certainty. Whatever happened here, you didn't hide it well. Her breath hitched. She whispered, barely audible, You're doing this on purpose. I nodded once. I am. The officers turned toward me, waiting for my next move. And I had one. I have photographs, I said calmly. Of the house. Of the marks. Of the stains. Of the things that have moved, or haven't moved. Her legs buckled slightly. The female officer stepped closer. Ma'am, can we see them? Yes, I said. I collected everything she thought I wouldn't notice. Her face collapsed, not physically but emotionally, like a mask sliding off. And that was when I understood. The truth wasn't just buried in this house. It was written all over her. And she knew I was finally reading it. I didn't move toward her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Fear fills silence faster than it fills shouting, and she felt every bit of it. Her breathing turned shallow, and she gripped the edge of the hallway table like the house itself was tilting beneath her feet. The officers exchanged a quiet look, the kind that meant they sensed the shift in the air too. But I wasn't waiting for them anymore. Their questions, their notes, their formal approach, they all mattered, yes. But what mattered more was the truth I was about to reveal in a way she never expected. Not loud. Not dramatic. Quiet. Steady. Precise. That's how women my age win battles. Ma'am, the female officer asked gently, do you have the photographs you mentioned? I nodded. In the drawer by the dining table. She followed me, but I walked slowly on purpose, letting the tension stretch behind us. I could hear her, my daughter-in-law, hovering near the closet still, trying to mask the sound of her trembling. Even her footsteps had changed. Earlier they were sharp, confident. Now they dragged, light, as if she feared the floorboards might betray her too. I reached the drawer and pulled out the folder. Not thick, not dramatic, just structured, organized observations I'd been making for weeks. Dates, times, small inconsistencies, the kind liars forget they left behind. When I handed it to the officer, she nodded with the respect one gives a witness they can trust. But I wasn't watching her. I was watching her, the woman who had walked into my home, into my life, with smiles sharp enough to cut through anything gentle. The woman who once pretended to help me with recipes and errands, who offered to drive me to appointments, who said I was like a second mother. The same woman now staring at the floor, as though the answers she'd buried there were beginning to claw their way back up. The officer flipped through the first few photos. The marks on the floor. The misplaced items. A stain on the wall she hadn't cleaned well enough. A timeline of her movements. Her lies stacked neatly on top of each other. These are detailed, the officer said softly. Very helpful. She looked up, expecting me to smile or thank her. But I wasn't doing this for praise. I wasn't doing it for approval or validation. I was doing it for him. For the truth. And perhaps, for myself. The officer took a step aside to speak quietly with her partner. That left the two of us facing each other in the narrow hallway. My daughter-in-law straightened her back, trying to collect herself, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted everywhere, searching for something familiar to hold on to. You're misunderstanding everything, she said, her voice cracking in the middle. You're making this bigger than it is. Am I? I asked calmly. She swallowed hard. Yes. You're confused. You're grieving. You're remembering things wrong. Grieving. That word struck my chest like a cold breeze. She used it to weaken me, to dismiss me, to suggest that pain made me unreliable. But grief sharpens some people. I was one of them. I moved to the living room window, pulling the curtain back just a little. The yard outside was still, but my eyes caught something near the fence. A faint depression in the grass, a long and uneven line, too straight to be from an animal, too fresh to be from weather. A memory clicked. The neighbor's words. The suitcase. Heavy. Dragged. And now a line in the grass, faint but present. I let the curtain fall slowly. You said you were asleep during the night she went missing, I said, my voice soft, steady. You were sure of it. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. Were you? I asked again. Yes, she stammered. I told you. Yes, I interrupted gently. You did. One of the officers approached. Ma'am, she said to me, if you're noticing something new, please tell us. I didn't point at the yard. Not yet. I needed more from her first. I needed to watch her break a little more. Not out of cruelty, but because truth reveals itself when the lies run out of places to hide. Instead, I turned toward the hallway where the basement door sat silent, the lock unmoved for a week. I walked toward it, slow steps, each one causing her face to drain a little more. Don't, she whispered suddenly, her voice too desperate. The officer paused. Why not? She shook her head rapidly. Because there's nothing there. It's a mess. It's unsafe. Unsafe how? The officer asked. She looked trapped, her eyes darting toward the door, then toward me. I saw the panic rising, pushing its way into her voice, making her sound smaller. I haven't finished organizing it, she said. Another weak excuse. I touched the lock. It was cold, untouched, stiff. You said you checked this, I murmured. She shook her head. No, yes, I don't remember. Lies unravel like loose stitching. The more she tried to pull them tight, the faster they came apart. I didn't open the door. Not yet. The goal wasn't to find the truth in the basement. Not this moment. The goal was to let her expose herself before the officers saw what I already sensed. One of them stepped closer. Ma'am, would you be willing to allow us to inspect the basement now? Her eyes widened. Her fingers shook. She clutched her hands together like a child terrified of the dark. "I'd prefer you don't," she whispered. "It's private." "Private," the officer repeated. She nodded weakly. The officer looked at me. "Is the basement used for storage?" "Yes," I said. "But she hasn't allowed me down there for days." The officer wrote something down. Her partner made another quiet note. That's when I realized how powerful small truths are. Not grand revelations. Not dramatic confessions. Just tiny details, each one a stone in a foundation strong enough to crack a lie wide open. My daughter-in-law stepped forward, her hands out slightly as if pleading. "Please," she whispered. "You're all reading too much into this. I didn't do anything wrong." "Then why are you afraid of us looking?" the officer asked. She blinked rapidly, tears filling her eyes, not from sadness but from panic. Because you'll twist everything." She pointed at me, "she's making you think something's wrong." "She hasn't said anything false," the officer replied. Her shoulders slumped as if the weight of the officer's sentence pressed down on her spine. And that's when I knew the time had come for the next step. The step that would fracture whatever composure she had left. I walked slowly to my purse on the dining table. Inside, tucked between my wallet and a small notepad, was the first anonymous note. The one I had placed on her windshield at dawn. Only 6 words, written in a shaky script she couldn't trace. "You didn't clean it well enough." I didn't pull it out. I didn't show it to the officers. I only touched it lightly, reminding myself of what came next. The second note was already in my sweater pocket, folded tightly. As I walked past her, I let the note slip from my fingers onto the floor. Quiet, deliberate. She noticed instantly. Her eyes widened as the folded paper landed near her feet. She didn't reach for it. She didn't dare. The officer noticed the movement. "What's that?" My daughter-in-law shook her head violently. "Nothing," she dropped something. But when the officer crouched to pick it up, her breath stopped entirely. The officer unfolded the note, reading it silently. Her expression changed. My daughter-in-law whispered, "Please, please don't." But the officer already looked at her with new eyes. Eyes that saw fear where innocence should have been. I stood still, letting the moment settle. Fear has a sound. A soft, breaking sound. I heard it in her breathing. The officer lifted the note. "Care to explain this?" she asked. My daughter-in-law's mouth moved, but no words came out. The crack had begun. And watching it spread quietly, steadily, was the real revenge. He had spent months hiding, lying, covering. Now she couldn't even speak. And I hadn't even started. But the moment the officer lifted that small folded note, her entire body seemed to deflate, her shoulders sinking as though the truth was finally too heavy to keep balanced. The room fell into a thick, stretched silence, the kind that makes even the walls seem to lean in to listen. And as I stood there watching her struggle to breathe evenly, I realized something new. She wasn't just frightened of what I'd uncovered. She was frightened of what she'd thought she could hide. The officers didn't press her, not immediately. The female officer simply held the note loosely in her hand, waiting. Silence is a powerful tool. It forces liars to fill the space. And she, now trembling visibly, seemed unsure which lie she'd used last. "I don't," she whispered, but her voice broke before she could finish. She looked at me instead of the officers, desperate for some direction, some hint of what I knew and what I didn't. But I kept my face calm, neutral, steady. The truth was catching up to her, and I wasn't about to slow it down. The taller officer stepped forward, speaking gently but firmly. "Ma'am, we'll need you to stay in the living room. We're requesting a follow-up inspection today." The second she heard those words, something inside her cracked. A soft sound escaped her, half gasp, half whimper, and she clutched her arm as if needing to hold herself together. "You said yesterday," she began, her voice shaking. "We said our investigation was ongoing," the officer corrected calmly. "Today we're expanding it." Her breathing quickened. She looked at the basement door, then the hallway closet, then the window, as though every exit suddenly closed off around her. And for the first time her fear wasn't controlled or masked. It was raw, instinctive, and unfiltered. I stepped toward the dining table, steadying myself against the chair. At my age, standing for long stretches brings a quiet ache to the legs, but I didn't mind it today. The ache grounded me. Reminded me I had lived long enough to know when a person's mask was close to tearing. The officers exchanged a glance. Then the male officer spoke into his radio, requesting backup and additional equipment. My daughter-in-law flinched at the sound, her hand flying to her mouth as though she'd been physically struck. "You don't need all that," she said quickly. I told you there's nothing here. There's nothing to find." The female officer looked at her calmly. "We'll determine that." Her eyes darted around again, wide and frantic, until they landed on me. "Tell them," she whispered harshly. "Tell them they're wrong. Tell them you're confused." But I didn't speak. And that silence, my silence, was the moment she broke. She stumbled backward into the corner of the room, pressing her palm against the wall as though trying to hold herself upright. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please just stop." The officers didn't move toward her. They didn't need to. She was unraveling faster than anything they could do manually. Panic sharpens honesty, or destroys it. I wasn't sure which direction she would fall, but either way the truth would surface. A knock sounded at the front door. Firm official. She jumped as though jolted by electricity. Backup had arrived. The officers moved toward the door while she pressed herself deeper into the corner. I watched her carefully. Her fingers dug into the paint of the wall, her breath coming in short bursts. The door opened and 2 more officers stepped inside, carrying clipboards, sealed evidence kits, and a sense of purpose that filled the room like a cold wind. She recoiled. Why are there more of you?" she stammered. "This is standard procedure," one officer said. "No," she whispered. "No, it's not." Her reaction was too visceral, too immediate. She knew what standard procedure meant. She knew what new officers meant. They hadn't even asked a question yet and she was already spiraling. The female officer approached me gently. "Ma'am, we'd like to go through the areas you mentioned earlier in more detail." I nodded. "Of course." He turned to the others. "Start with the hallway closet. Then photograph the yard." My daughter-in-law's knees buckled slightly. You can't go outside," she said, voice trembling. "It's icy. Dangerous." "It's clear and dry," the officer replied firmly. He swallowed hard. I meant the soil it's sensitive." "Sensitive how?" he asked. She blinked rapidly. I just planted something." "In January?" he asked. And there was another fracture. Another lie she couldn't maintain. 2 officers headed to the yard with cameras and measurement tools. She looked as if she might collapse, and for a brief moment, a small temporary flicker, I wondered whether she feared what they would find, or simply feared the moment of discovery itself. People hide truths for different reasons. But her reason was drowning her now. The officers inside moved toward the closet. The male officer opened the door slowly, letting the camera capture every inch. She let out a sound, not a scream, not exactly, more like a breath that had been trapped in her chest for too long. "It's just storage," she insisted desperately. "Just old things. You're overreacting." But when the officer pulled out a flashlight and swept it across the walls, the floor, the shelf, I saw it again, that barely noticeable smear I had discovered earlier. The one she had wiped but not fully erased. "We'll test this," he said. "No," she shouted, lunging forward. The female officer caught her by the arm. "Ma'am, you need to step back." "You don't understand," she cried, her voice now high and frantic. I didn't. None of this is what you think." Her words dissolved into a strangled sob. Not a gentle cry. A full-body collapse of emotion. Watching her crumble didn't give me satisfaction. Not exactly. It gave me clarity. The truth wasn't something I needed to drag out of her. It was something she couldn't hold in anymore. I stepped back, letting the officers work. I didn't need to be at the center. I had played my role. Now the truth would reveal itself through their careful, methodical steps. The officer who had gone outside stepped back in, brushing dirt from his gloves. "The soil is disturbed," he said quietly to his colleague. "Recent. Possibly within 48 hours." She let out a broken cry, covering her ears as though she could shut out the evidence itself. "Stop," she begged. "Please stop. I can't do this." "No one is accusing you yet," the female officer said evenly. "But your reactions are making this harder." She shook her head violently. "No. You don't get it. She's doing this to me." She pointed at me with a shaking hand. She hates me. She wanted this, she wanted all of this, she's turning you against me. I looked at her steadily. I didn't have to turn them, I replied softly. You did that yourself. Her knees gave out completely. She landed on the floor with a thud, her hands bracing against the hardwood. An officer knelt near her. Are you all right? She shook her head, tears streamed down her cheeks. I can't breathe, she whispered. I can't do this. You're not under arrest, he reminded her gently. But you need to answer our questions. Her head snapped up. And for the first time her eyes didn't look furious or defensive. They looked defeated. What questions? She whispered. The officer took out his notepad. Start with last night. And before he asked anything else, he broke. Her voice shook. Her eyes darted. Her words came out in fragments. Not a confession. Not yet. But the beginning of one. And when she lifted her head again, she looked straight at me with a haunting realization. I hadn't needed to speak a single accusation. The truth was pulling itself out of her. And she had finally understood. There was no place left to hide. The moment that truth finally settled into her eyes, the room seemed to shift. Not physically, nothing moved, but something inside her collapsed so completely that even the officers paused, unsure whether to step forward or give her the space to crumble on her own. She stayed kneeling on the floor, breathing in quick, shallow bursts, gripping the wood as though the boards themselves might keep her from sliding further into the truth she'd spent weeks avoiding. I didn't move toward her. I didn't need to. The distance between us wasn't just physical. It was made of every moment she'd lied, every detail she'd scrubbed away, every false smile she'd worn while telling me everything was fine. Now those layers had peeled themselves back without me lifting a finger. One of the officers crouched beside her. Take your time. We're here to listen. Her head jerked up. You don't understand, she whispered, but her voice came out scratchy, the sound of someone forcing out words through panic. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. The officer nodded. Start at the beginning. She blinked. I don't know where the beginning is anymore. I did. I stepped closer. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just close enough that she felt my presence, my certainty, my patience. She looked at me the way someone might look at a mirror they've been avoiding for years. You already know, she whispered, but her gaze trembled. You've always known. No, I said softly. I didn't always know. But you taught me to pay attention. Her face crumpled. The officer spoke again. What happened the night your husband disappeared? My daughter-in-law's shoulders tightened. For a moment I thought she might lie again. Then her mouth opened, but instead of fabrication the truth came spilling out, jagged and broken. He confronted me, she whispered. He said he was tired of the arguments, tired of the tension, tired of pretending we were a family. My breath caught. I hadn't known about that conversation. But I stayed silent, letting her continue. He said he wanted space, she said. He said he was leaving for a few days. But then he started packing and I panicked. The officer leaned in. Why did that make you panic? She dragged her hands through her hair, tugging hard enough that strands came loose. Because I was afraid he'd tell her. She pointed at me, her fingers shaking. I thought he was going to expose me. I frowned. Expose what? She pressed her palms over her face. The money. My stomach tightened. Money? What about the money? The officer asked. She lowered her hands slowly, her expression hollow. The account, she whispered. The one she didn't know about. The one I opened in her name. The room tilted, not physically but in the way a revelation shifts gravity. In my name. I repeated. Why? Her jaw trembled. Because I thought, her voice cracked. I thought he'd leave me. And I wanted something to hold over him. Something that tied him to me. Something that could make him stay if he ever tried to walk away. My heart ached. Not for her but for the years she had manipulated my family without me ever seeing it. The officer's tone stayed steady. So you used her information to open a separate account? Yes, she whispered. I moved money around so it looked like she was unstable. Reckless. I was building a case in case he left me. A slow, cold breath left my lungs. She hadn't just lied. She had planned, carefully, meticulously, An entire narrative meant to paint me as fragile, untrustworthy, someone who needed help. Someone who might accidentally be blamed. But he found out, she continued, voice cracking harder now. He confronted me. He said he wouldn't let me drag her name into anything. He said he was going to tell her everything. The officer's question came softly. What happened after that? Tears spilled down her cheeks. We argued. It got loud. I tried to grab the papers from him, but he pushed them into the drawer and told me it was over. And then... She looked at her hands as though noticing them for the first time. Then he fell. My breath stopped. It was an accident, she choked. He stepped back while we were arguing and slipped on the rug. Hit his head on the corner of the table. I didn't do it on purpose. The officers stayed frozen for a moment, letting the weight of her confession settle. She continued, her voice shaking with every word. He wasn't moving. I tried to shake him, but he didn't wake up. And I panicked. I thought no one would believe me. I thought they'd say I meant to hurt him. I thought. She dissolved into sobs. I thought everything would be blamed on me. So you hit him, the officer said quietly. She nodded, covering her mouth. I didn't know what to do. I kept thinking, just a little longer, just until I figure out a plan. She shook her head violently. But the days passed and I kept waiting for the courage to make a call. But I never did. The truth was a weight that finally crushed her. I felt something inside me crack. Not anger, not even grief, but a deep, raw ache. A part of me had waited for a different truth, a different ending. But this was the truth I got. The officer put a hand on her shoulder. Where is he now? She sobbed harder. The basement. The lock. The smell. The untouched latch. Yes, she whispered. I thought if I kept it locked long enough, maybe the problem would disappear. Maybe she pointed at me, would think he'd left. Maybe everyone would. The room fell silent. Then she looked right at me, eyes swollen, voice barely a thread. I never meant to hurt you. I took a long, steady breath. You didn't just hurt me, I said quietly. You erased him. A tear rolled down her cheek. I didn't know what else to do. You could have told the truth, I said. She closed her eyes, breaking fully. The officer stood. Ma'am, we need you to come with us. She didn't fight. Not this time. She simply nodded, her body limp, her steps unsteady as they guided her toward the door. As she passed me, she whispered, I thought I could convince you I was innocent. I met her eyes. You taught me how to see the truth, I said softly. You should have been more careful. She looked shattered. And then she was gone. The officers headed to the basement next. I didn't follow. I didn't need to see. I already knew the truth, and I had no strength left to witness what she had tried to hide. I walked to the kitchen table and sat down slowly. My hands rested on the wood, feeling its familiar warmth. The house was quiet, truly quiet for the first time in weeks. My son burst through the door moments later, breathless, eyes searching. Mom, where is she? I looked up at him, tears finally rising. They took her, I said softly. He dropped to his knees beside me. What happened? I cupped his face gently. The truth came out. His eyes filled with grief, shock, and something else, relief. He leaned his forehead against my shoulder. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I should have seen it. She hid it well, I said. But people show you who they are eventually. We stayed like that for a long moment. Just breathing. Just existing in the pain but not drowning in it. Later, when the officers returned upstairs, I stood. My legs trembled, but I held my ground. One officer spoke gently. Ma'am, we found him. We'll treat everything with respect. I nodded. A tear slipped down my cheek, but my voice stayed steady. Thank you. The sun dipped lower, casting gentle gold across the floor. For the first time in a very long while, the house didn't feel heavy. Felt mine again. My silence had once protected her lies. But now, I had reclaimed my voice. I had reclaimed my truth. And in doing so, I took my life back. The final line came to me as I closed my eyes, letting the last rays of daylight touch my face. Some people break you to silence you. But I found my strength in the quiet. And the quiet saved me. If this story touched you, shaken you, or made you feel seen, subscribe for more powerful revenge and betrayal stories. Your support keeps these emotional journeys alive.